Welcome to Full Speed Ahead. I'm Craig Fuller here for the State of Freight, talking with Derek Leathers, the CEO of Werner Enterprises. Derek, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Derek, lots going on. The market has been incredibly volatile over the last couple of years. It's actually been one of the longest freight recessions in history. What are you observing right now about the market?
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree. It's been about the most difficult market I've seen in my career over the last couple of years. But the good news is I think the worst is behind us. We've seen kind of a steady, but not non-material, but still steady improvement that really started in kind of mid-July, early July. A couple of lulls, little air pockets in between then and now. But in general, the good news is we've continued to see this sort of up into the right trajectory relative to volumes, demand. And frankly, what's aiding that, I think, is the ongoing attrition of carrier capacity in the market.
Now, I know you were pretty vocal during the last couple of years on some of the public conference calls about your expectations for the market to reset, and had expressed, surprise about how long some of these carriers stayed in business. I think we go back to 2022. We all thought, including myself, this market would reset. This cycle has been completely different. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I just think, a global pandemic is something that is completely different as well. And we probably all underestimated the impact, right? I mean, I think a couple of things happened, right? The increase in demand, the wallet share shift between services and goods, combined with the just vast amount of stimulus that a lot of small and mid-sized carriers in particular participated in, created kind of a cash vault, if you will, that they could dip into for longer than we've ever seen previously during the down cycle. Most cycles, even in good times, carriers struggle to really cover their cost of capital in the best of times. And then when it gets tight at all, it washes them out fairly quickly. This was different. I mean, we've done different analysis. I don't know what the rate number is, but we think somewhere in the neighborhood of, $150,000 per truck could have been accumulated during that upcycle. And it's been slowly, that cash burn has taken a long time to get through. And now we're at a state where that combined with lender leniency, et cetera, has just prolonged this one way longer than what we've been traditionally used to.
Yeah, 150,000 that you're citing is really the COVID stimulus, the loan programs, et cetera. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, well, it's the combined impact of the COVID stimulus and the rate environment that existed for a period of time, and that small, mid-sized carriers' nimbleness in terms of being able to expose themselves to almost exclusively spot market business without really thinking through what happens after the peak. And so they've suffered a great deal since then because they were highly exposed into that spot market. That market was so inflated. And so the combined cash accumulation of high spot market rates and stimulus money just provided them a cushion that was larger than what prior cushions would have looked like. And all of that has led to just this very prolonged attrition cycle. But it's still happening. It's still happening every week. And I think as it continues to happen, we'll find ourselves in a more balanced market, which actually I believe that's kind of where we're at now, is much more of a balanced market that will be tight, as we move forward into the future.
Are you seeing some level of normal seasonality? One of the things that we've identified in the data is that things seem to be responding on a normal basis, whether it's road check week or holidays, seem to be, participating the way that you would expect them to. Is that also something that you guys are experiencing?
Yeah, that's our view on it as well. I mean, now we have to be fair and kind of balance that view or temper that view a little bit with, we had port disruptions, although they only lasted a few days with the strike. We had some pull forward in anticipation of the port's disruption. We had a little bit outsized hurricane activity, at least in terms of impact. So it's still a little cloudy, but in general, yes, I think we're finally back to what normal seasonality looks like. And I love the reference to road check because that was the first time for me that the light bulb went on and I said, hey, this is a lot closer to normal than we think.
Yeah, that's what the data shows as well. So let's talk about where we're at right now. Trump, has been elected. The stock market has certainly responded to that development. What are shippers saying in the market right now about 2025?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think sticking to the theme of normalcy, which I know is not a word often associated maybe with Trump, but what it does is it gives us, regardless of who won, it would give us some degree of clarity and ability to make investment decisions over some at least 4-year time horizon. But I think in particular with this one, with Trump winning, we know that his stance and his policies relative to sort of pushing environmental issues out in front of the technology capabilities is probably going to be more tempered. We know that our ability to continue to try to respond to what is likely to now be an accelerated version of nearshoring is something that's positive for our business, and I would argue for North American truckers in general. I think there's a lot of things that would lend itself to kind of an extension of like a return to normal seasonality, normal season patterns. The flip side of that is I'm a subscriber to the idea that we're probably going to see some an increased demand in the short term as people who have not yet figured out a nearshore plan are probably going to try to aggressively move prior to tariffs. Whether they can meet that deadline or not is sort of suspect because if you haven't already made the plan and shipped the goods and got them on the water or at least headed to the coast overseas, you may or may not actually get in across the finish line before some of the tariff activity starts to take place. The short term, I think it just means higher volumes for freight.
What are shippers saying right now? There's been some conversations, public conference calls with some of the consumer product companies and companies that sell into retail. Have talked about that they're moving sourcing, particularly away from China. What are you hearing from your customers?
Yeah, really same thing, right? So those that already had footprints elsewhere have been expanding the capacity of those footprints or leading into those footprints further. Those that didn't are on a longer journey, but have already started that journey. So they're acquiring either new vendors or new land for construction if it happens to be more of a manufacturing environment. So everything we're seeing is consistent with the theme that the decoupling is well underway. I actually just spent several days in Mexico visiting with many of our customers across the country. It was prior to the election, but it was interesting to me that they were. I got back from that trip, and an entire trip of probably a couple hundred interactions in total over that time frame. Didn't run into a single person that wasn't in the Trump camp on the Mexican side of the border, because of the fact that they're smart enough to realize that does apply more pressure for more nearshoring. They want to see that opportunity for their country. And so I think there's a lot of excitement in the shipper community, at least that community that has a presence in Mexico right now.
Do you think Mexico has based on what you saw, do they have the resources, do they have the labor availability to actually handle the kinds of volume if we were sort of decouple away from China?
Yeah, I think it's yet to be determined, right? Like, I'm a big pro-Mexico guy. I lived and worked there for many years. I love the people, love the culture, love the country, frankly. But with that said, they have a once-in-a-generation opportunity right now, but it's going to take the government to engage on it for it to be successful. Infrastructure is under duress in Mexico in a significant way, and I mean that holistically. So whether that's water availability, power availability, or road quality, all of them are under duress right now, even at current levels. So this nearshoring is going to stress that network beyond the breaking point if they don't pivot and engage in a significant way to upgrade the infrastructure. Probably the best thing they have going for them is labor availability. Demographics in Mexico are really well set up for the next 10 to 15 years by comparison to other countries around the globe. They don't have that sort of inverted pyramid problem that many other countries have with demographics shrinking in the out years. In fact, it actually grows in the out years. So I think labor is the strength of it. I think resources are available. Land is certainly available, but the core infrastructure issues in Mexico need to be addressed. And then the fourth pillar is security. As pro-Mexico as I may be, I was disheartened on my trip to hear the level of concern about the ongoing increase in security issues that they're all kind of going through. And so I really hope the country does something about it because it is critically important if they're going to truly benefit from this nearshoring trend.
So, Derek, just a change in the freight market over the last couple of decades. We've seen, just an enormous change in the market going from long haul to really short haul. The long haul business used to be among the most profitable parts of the trucking industry, but that's changed over the last couple of decades. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think it's a variety of things. I think, certainly on that list of items would be, the ongoing growth of intermodal. Intermodal makes a lot of sense if it's truly a long haul load that's less time sensitive, maybe more price sensitive, or is accomplishing kind of a short-term environmental type goals. That's part of it. I think another part of it that gets overlooked is consumers' desire to get everything overnight or get everything in very short order, which has caused the massive growth of sort of small to mid-size warehouses across the nation. It's caused longer length of haul loads to be broken up into their component parts. It's caused carriers like us to have to react to that and really kind of lean into regional fleets and increased dedicated fleets to be able to service all of this very high service sensitive freight on a shorter length of haul. So all of those things I think play a role. I've thought for some time that intermodal was going to have sort of structural headwinds in the out years because people's behavior continues to be more kind of immediate gratification and wanting everything so quickly. One exception to that a little bit is cross-border Mexico, which still has a pretty long length of haul and less competitive pressure from intermodal. And that's just related to, I think, combination of security issues, transit issues, and just overall reliability. That is getting better. We participate in cross-border intermodal ourselves. It's getting better, but truck has still got a pretty significant advantage in terms of service, transit, and reliability coming out of Mexico.
Do you think over the next decade that we see the shift from sort of that west to east trade where, as Mexico becomes a much bigger part of our economy, it sort of goes back to the north-south trade, the I-35 trade? Do you think that's where we see the concentration of freight?
Well, I certainly hope so. That's where we're placing our bets. We've got one of the largest cross-border franchises in all of North America. We're going to continue to lead into it. I think it is only reasonable to assume if you look at direct foreign investment in Mexico over the last couple of years, it's exploded. Last year was essentially an all-time record that it was the largest year since I think '06. And this year we surpassed that number by mid-year. And I have a feeling next year will be a repeat of the same behavior. So there's a lot going on down there, and our ability to serve those customers is something we're really proud of.
Shippers have been thinking about new solutions migrating. 20 years ago, they were absolutely adamant that freight that was intended for a truck couldn't go by rail. This has largely changed. I think the philosophy among shippers is they expect you to deliver it the most efficient way, but also meet their service requirements. How are you thinking about multimodal, and why should shippers be thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is we have to meet our shippers where they're at. We've got to kind of be mode agnostic. We've got to find kind of what the best solution is. But it is a trade-off. I mean, there is a trade-off, and it can't be refuted that there's price trade-offs, there's service trade-offs, and then most importantly, there's reliability. So it's not just transit, but it's the reliability of that transit. I think our customers, if we're doing our job right, we listen to them, and we listen to them as to what is truly critical. And that stuff's going to, by and large, remain on truck, and stuff that can have a little more variability to it and has a long enough length of haul profile might very well end up going intermodal. But I don't see service expectations going down anytime soon. So I think there is this sort of natural tension between truck and rail, whereby truck can simply do things that is almost impossible to replicate on a rail. And so we'll keep meeting with our customers, and we'll try to meet them where they're at and build solutions that fit what they're shipping, because very few customers only ship one thing. Some do, but most don't. And so it's a matter of understanding at kind of a SKU level what really matters and how do we make sure I accommodate that.
Did I hear you correct that you said that Mexico, the north-south trade didn't have enough intermodal capacity to handle the flow of cargo?
Well, I think it's more than just capacity. I think there's still some reliability issues that, although improving, are not yet to sort of U.S. standards of service or reliability. I think that's a problem. I think the security thing is a little bit heightened still on intermodal in Mexico, and the ability for shipments to be disrupted from a security perspective is still there and present. I think all of that is, I want to be clear, improving every day, and we're proud of the intermodal work we do cross-border. But if somebody looks me in the eyes and says, hey, I've got X amount of shipments and they're critically important and I need high 90% type on-time delivery, I'm probably not putting that on the train, at least not today.
And what about escorts? Is this still a factor in Mexico? Is that you need escorts for the trucks, or has that been something that's been resolved?
Certainly has not been resolved. We don't see a lot of active escort type work, but there are shipments that are required, and we certainly employ it on a regular basis on the Mexico side. Most shipments are still moving without escorts, but there is an increase. Back to my trip to Mexico last week, it was surprising to me the level of concern and the level of increased concern relative to security on the highways, and it was even heightened further with relative to security on the rails. And it's really the thing we've been all reading and seeing, which is the cartels are flush with money right now. They're expanding their reach of operation, and they're now starting to cause havoc in places that traditionally were left alone. For years when escorts and things were needed, it was much more prevalent on domestic freight in Mexico, and they tended to stay away from international freight to kind of stay further off the radar. Well, they're emboldened now, and they've been further emboldened. And so, although we see very little issues with crime relative to any of the shipments that we do every day, we know that it is increasing. And so we have an eye on that, and we're trying to monitor it closely and working with, we have several different options and ways by which we can further secure that cargo and put eyes on that cargo. Escorts are one of them.
So, Derek, I was told once that by somebody really close to national security that the cartels were not going to disrupt the flow of cargo to the U.S. because they needed that to bring in, contraband, drugs, etc. Is that your expectation too? That they, that they're in some ways they benefit from the north-south trade, that they don't want to be overly disruptive to it?
Yeah, I think that's always been conventional wisdom. That's certainly been where my head has always been at. And it really honestly wasn't until this trip a week ago that it sort of heightened my concern a little bit further than just banking on that to be true. We have not, it's interesting coming back from that trip, I wanted to validate my own data. We've not seen a theft or a total cargo theft this year, and we cross more trailers into and out of Mexico than anybody. But what they're telling me is it's coming and it's getting closer all of the time. And they've had some near misses, they being both shippers and Mexican carriers on international trade. And that is new. That is not something that has been traditionally true. And it seems to be something that is growing of concern right now.
Speaking of theft, one of the big topics in the industry is load board fraud. We've seen fraud that's been really propagating throughout the industry, really taking place, double brokering scenarios, load phishing, etc. How are you guys dealing with this challenge?
Yeah, so knock on wood, but we've had a heck of a year so far counteracting that. I'm very proud of our brokerage group and our logistics group in terms of their ability to manage it. We've set up several tripwires and steps to be able to catch it on the front end, be able to prevent it before it happens. And in a few cases, actively engaged when we believed it was happening and have actually intercepted some shipments. Year to date, you can count on one hand the number of shipments that we've had any kind of active engagement on relative to theft or double brokering or fraud. That's a remarkable number when you consider our brokerage division, brokerage operations are kind of 700 billion and growing. And so we're excited about that. Now, with that, you can't rest. It is a very large concern and should be for everybody out there. These folks are getting more and more innovative. They're real businesses now. It's no longer just some bad actor out there trying to steal a load. These are organized crime activities with sophistication and technology that are mimicking or imitating a real carrier, and they're pretty darn good at it. So I'm not going to disclose our secret sauce or what we're doing internally because it's working well, and I want it to keep working. But I can tell you, if you sit back and don't engage on it, or you're working with small undercapitalized brokers, I think your exposure is going to be very, very high and only get higher going forward.
Yeah, it seems like AI is just going to make that propagation so much easier because,
it's going to make it nearly impossible over time. It is going to continue to be a problem. And as well as I do how easy it is to mimic voices, mimic videos, mimic actual confirmation calls from a person you talk to every day. And it's actually all of a sudden not that person. So it's scary. And we're training heavily inside of our built walls, trying to introduce AI, using AI even for spam and other purposes to try to trick or teach people as to how realistic this stuff can be. And so far so good. Our people are really holding down the fort well. But again, can't sleep on this one. It's not going away. And I think it's going to take higher level engagement, i.e. government engagement at some point, probably to help wrangle this a little bit. But the first step is working with quality providers, whether that's us or someone else, but somebody who's got very high level of concern and therefore very high solution sets to prevent this from becoming an ongoing problem.
What kinds of questions should shippers be asking to screen the types of partners that they have, particularly on the brokerage side of the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't run a brokerage RFP today that does not include an entire section on, what are your preventative measures? Tell me about your tech stack. Tell me about what kind of technology you use. What is your cybersecurity stance? And to the extent you can disclose, how do we know that you're our best in class? I'd be demanding third-party validation of some of those very statements, which exist and are readily available to validate people's security stance from a third-party perspective. Some of which are active and updated daily. And so the information's out there. I think the shippers need to be engaging on this because they're putting their own networks at risk if they're working with folks that aren't taking this seriously.
Is this like a SOC 2 compliant kind of infrastructure, or does it go broader than that?
Yeah, that would certainly be part of it, but no, broader than that as it relates to some of the real-time services that are out there. And I apologize, I don't have them off the top of my head, but we personally subscribe to a couple of them, where they validate not only our security posture, throughout the day at 365 days a year, but also many other of our competitors and even in some cases our customers, because we're also vulnerable to anybody that we're sort of intermingled with, which includes shippers, underlying providers, suppliers, vendors, etc. So doing all of that work is what helps keep you in a secure position, and nothing's guaranteed. I can't promise we're never going to be a victim of one of these attacks. What I can tell you is we're doing everything in our power to make sure we're not.
Well, the smaller companies are certainly more vulnerable, and they don't have the financial backdrop or resources if something, happens. One of the advantages of being large, having infrastructure, is that you have the experience to deal with an issue. You also are going to get the attention of the authorities, unlike a small company that unfortunately, whether this is right or wrong, I think the authorities should take everyone serious. That just isn't the way the world works. You have the ability to actually pull a lot more resources into a situation, more so than a small company when something inevitably happens.
Yeah, that's exactly right, except for I would say that if you're small or mid-size, build relationships with your local FBI. It's just like any other relationship you need to build, but you need to know who they are. They need to know who you are. We engage actively with various governmental agencies that are in this space. And obviously because of our cross-border business, with same thing with DEA, FBI, CBP, across the board, we have day-to-day relationship level contacts there that we can reach out to and get engaged immediately when we think something looks nefarious. And it's kind of like when you report emails as phishing or spam and you get an IT answer that says, no, this is legitimate. Sometimes you over-report to them and sometimes you get them engaged and it turns out that it's okay. That's fine because no harm, no foul. But you must have those relationships. And the time to have them is not after you think you've got a theft ring underway inside your organization.
Yeah, I think your point about getting involved with authorities, encouraging them to get involved is important. And educating them. What I have found oftentimes with the authorities is they don't understand the problem and realize how pervasive it is, and frankly, how lucrative it is for organized crime. So this is an important issue that I think needs to be really highlighted. Our industry is the only folks that can bring education and attention to it. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Derek, before we go, I'd like to talk a little bit about 2025, what your expectations are for next year. How are you thinking about the next 12 months?
Yeah, I'm excited about what I think the potential for 25 looks like. It's obviously going to be a slow build, and we're coming out of a deep valley. So I'm really speaking for the industry here, or about the industry. Nobody elected me to speak for it, but it's going to be a slow build. We see that build continuing. I think attrition will continue to take place. I think wallet shares return to normalcy between services and goods. I think there's going to be some pent-up goods demand on the durable goods side because people have kind of taken a break from that while they were out traveling and spending more money on experiences, and you'll see a return to replacement of a lot of the goods that haven't been replaced. I'm excited about where interest rates will likely go. I think overall stability and certainty in the economy has a ton of weight. Again, regardless of who had won, just certainty, knowing what we're dealing with and what the rules of the game are. That's good for the consumer. It's good for the shipping community and carriers. So I think 25 has the opportunity to clearly show that 24 was the trough. And 25 is the slow climb out. And then as we get further along, I think it gets better from there.
You think shippers should be playing defense right now and thinking about their routing guides, and the risk is on them at this point?
Absolutely believe that. Yes. I mean, I think an educated shipper today is already actively working on solidifying who their core carriers are, what that asset solution looks like, validating that it's real, not looking for further concessions when inflation is eating P&Ls up across the board in the trucking industry, and instead talking about how do we return to a level that allows you to reinvest in your business and grow and have carriers that can grow with you as you grow, because you keep cutting people out or you keep rates where they are today, and then you're going to wake up in a much further consolidated industry where leverage is clearly going to be on the other side of the desk. And so this would be the time. If I was a shipper, I get asked that a lot, like, well, what would you do if you were in my shoes? And I said, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be taking the last 3%, knowing that it's going to result in double-digit increases for potentially multiple cycles. I'd instead be talking about, hey, what can we do reasonably and rationally here to kind of solidify the relationship going forward? And we'll have shippers that take both paths, and we'll respond to shippers accordingly. Like, I'm a big believer, and they are the customer. They set the rules. We just play by them, and we'll play our position.
Yeah, I think this is going to be my view of it is that it's going to be a pretty interesting year for 25. I think it's actually going to be pretty aggressive. I think it's shippers that are not thinking about things like decoupling from China, or are not thinking about the potential of routing guides breaking down like they did in 2020, are going to regret it significantly. Trump's orientation toward tax cuts, Trump's orientation towards, tax incentives, and the tariff threat is real. You should be taking those things serious. And if you're not, there is a potential of you repeating what you saw in 2020, the end of 2020, 2021.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly right. And I think most of them are taking it very seriously. But for those that aren't, or believe that this capacity bubble is going to last forever, I think there's going to be consequences. And, it is what it is, right? People choose the strategy they think is right. And I think this is a time to be thoughtful, not emotional, both post-election in general, but also relative to this issue.
Derek, really appreciate your time today. Good luck for the next, good luck in 25 and beyond. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it, Craig. Take care.